Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is First Amendment attorney Jeff Lewis. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on today to discuss, from your perspective, legally speaking, if there's any nuance when it comes to presidential pardons. Because earlier this week, President Trump posted on Truth Social that the pardons President Biden granted to lawmakers who served on the House January 6th committee were, quote, hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because he claimed that the former president used an auto pen. As an attorney, what do you think about President Trump's claim?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, when a president posts on social media, such as Truth Social, that has no force and effect. Things happen through either executive order, legislation, or court order. For years, lawyers, legislatures, federal officers have used mechanical means to reproduce their signature. There's a well-known, circulated 2005 legal opinion by the Office of White House Counsel authorizing the use of a mechanical reproduction of a signature, such as an auto pen. And this was done back in the Bush administration, George W. Bush. And so there is no real controversy about the legality of using an auto pen.
I want to read what else President Trump claimed, because it's not just that President Biden used an auto pen. It's also that essentially the question was raised, did President Biden know what was being signed? This is what else he wrote. Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Is there any evidence that that's true? And let's say that was true. Is that a crime?
Well, let me just say this. That's the better argument by President Trump, that the key to this kind of analysis is not how was a signature affixed to a document, but did the person, the federal officer, the president, et cetera, have the intent to have his signature put on the document, and did he direct an authorized person to put his signature on the document? And if President Biden didn't know what he was signing, and if President Biden didn't authorize his signature to be affixed on those documents, it could raise both civil and criminal issues. But the reality is this kind of issue is not going to be played out unless one of the people who are pardoned were charged with a crime, and that person then who was charged with the crime raised the pardon as a defense, and some court had to weigh in on whether or not the pardon was valid. Unless that happens, all of this is just happy talk on social media.
So this is just happy talk on social media, you're saying, but can a presidential pardon ever be reversed? I mean, what's the legality behind that? Once it's issued, that's the rule of law, right?
It is, unless some judge ruling on the validity of the pardon did find that President Biden didn't authorize it, didn't know about it, didn't direct somebody to put his signature there, or the person who put his signature there didn't have actual authority. But the possibility or probability of such a legal proceeding occurring is extremely low, in my opinion. I don't think we'll ever know the answer.
Well, I want to read something that President Trump's White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, said, because I think it lends itself to opening another door. He said this: it's not just that the pardons were signed with an auto pen, it's that clearly the former president, Joe Biden, had absolutely no awareness of or any clue about what was being signed in his name. And he also added, in other words, you have all these instances where you can show that something was signed by an auto pen when Joe Biden was not even physically present, aware, around at all. So do you think, based on that statement there, that the Trump administration is going to start getting things that President Biden signed by an auto pen and declaring all of them essentially null and void?
He could try to declare them null and void, although a president is always free to issue an executive order countermanding a prior president's executive order. So the issue really is kind of narrowly focused on pardons. Because there's no historical precedent for a president to come in and void a prior pardon. And I will say this, the issue of being physically present, that's kind of a red herring. That's not a real issue. There's no requirement that a president be physically present. The key is, did President Biden know what was being signed, and did he direct somebody to affix his signature? That's the real key.
And it sounds like that's what they're hinting at, because the White House press secretary also hinted at that. She asked the press, was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? So that's what it seems like the Trump administration is getting at. How hard would that be to prove?
It would be very hard, especially in light of executive privilege, to prove what happens in the Oval Office. The burden would be high, and this would only arise in terms of a legal challenge, probably in a criminal proceeding against one of the people who were pardoned. And some judge would have to decide if he's going to allow evidence to be taken in criminal discovery on the issue of President Biden's whereabouts and intentions in the final days of his administration. I just don't see a criminal judge opening up that Pandora's box.
So as an attorney here, you're saying this auto pen, what was dubbed the auto pen scandal, this isn't really a scandal, but what else sticks out to you here in this situation?
Yeah, the scandal is not the use of auto pen, and the scandal is the suggestion that one president can vacate, void, or challenge a prior president's pardons. That's never been done in the history of our country, and it's a real Pandora's box. So that's real concerning. In terms of everything else, in terms of executive orders and other documents signed by President Biden, President Trump already has the power to undo or reverse things that were done by President Biden. So the real issue here is pardons. And until some judge takes this up in the context of a criminal prosecution, this is all going to be just chitter chatter on social media and on news stations. But there's not going to be any chance really that a judge is ever going to opine on this.
So there's no precedence here. It opens a Pandora's box, but no judge really, you're saying, would want to do this. Legally, like, it really can't be done?
Well, I'm not going to say can't, but the obstacles for a judge to get this actual dispute in front of that judge are huge. The first obstacle would be the DOJ would have to decide they want to initiate a federal prosecution against someone who was pardoned. And then that person who was pardoned would have to raise the issue of the pardon as a defense. And then the court could either dismiss the charges, saying the pardon's valid, or open up a Pandora's box and allow discovery and testimony on the issue of President Biden's capacity at the time that the pardons were signed. And I don't think the Trump administration is really going to go that far. I really don't. They've got other fish to fry.
When you're thinking about those other fish to fry, because I know that this is so narrow, it seems pretty cut and dry. When you're thinking about the other legal hurdles that the Trump administration is facing right now, I just want to ask you one final question. I mean, what sticks out to you? What are some of your takeaways as an attorney here, as a constitutional lawyer? What are you thinking about?
Well, anytime an executive tries to expand executive power, expand the power of the president beyond his predecessors, that always gets the attention of constitutional lawyers, whether it's flying detainees out to a foreign country in violation of court orders or challenging the acts of a prior pen. You're always curious, how far will the executive push the boundaries? Will courts rein in that executive? And most importantly, will the executive respect the orders of any court that puts limitations on the expansion of executive power? And that's what we're really looking at, is what is the executive branch going to do in response to recent court orders regarding U.S. aid, regarding the flights to El Salvador, etc. Will this president ultimately respect the orders of the judicial branch?
Based on what you're seeing 2 months into President Trump's second term, how far do you think the executive will push the boundaries here?
Oh, he's already pushed them far beyond any prior president. He's going to continue pushing until the Supreme Court or some higher court of the district level tells President Trump he can't. So far, that hasn't happened. We've had trial court level decisions, but we really haven't had any intermediate or Supreme Court decisions that telling the president he can't do that. So he's going to keep pushing until someone tells him no.
Well, I'm sure based on what you're saying, he's going to keep pushing. That means we have a lot more conversations to have here over the next 4 years, and I hope we can have one soon. Jeff Lewis, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.